For everybody joining now, thanks for joining us on the webinar. We're just waiting for everybody else to join. On the meantime, you will see in front of your screen a quick poll that asks what's your current work situation, just for us to kind of get an idea of where everybody on the line is currently in terms of working remotely. So if you can go ahead and fill that while you wait, and we will start shortly. All right, we will go ahead and begin the webinar now. Just sharing the results really quickly, just so we can all kind of see where the current audience is at. Looks like 80% of the people on the line today are working from home, and most of their organization or all of their organization is also working from home. So hopefully this will be a really great webinar for all of you guys. Give us some tips from our various experts of different backgrounds here today to let you know what they're doing, and some tips and tricks and best practices and all sorts of fun ideas to get us through the situation that's happening all over the world. So without further ado, we will begin. We're excited for today's webinar. Today we have Amy Oplinger Singh, the Senior Salesforce Consultant and two-time Salesforce MVP. We also have Peter Coffey, as many of you probably know both of these people, as they're very common faces that you see around. And Peter, of course, is the VP of Strategic Research at Salesforce. And then we also have our very own Efrat Geisler. She is the Director of Product Management here at Panaya. So thank you for joining us today, panelists. We're very excited to have you guys. Today, as you guys all know, we will be having a discussion about working remotely amidst today's working realities. My name is Daniela, and I will be your moderator for today's presentation. And just before we get started, I have a few housekeeping issues to go over with everybody. We have a packed audience, so of course all lines are going to be muted for optimal sound quality. We will have a Q&A at the end of the webinar, so as your questions come up, feel free to fill in the Q&A section that you'll see at the bottom of your screen, and we'll address them at the very end. Please note that the session is being recorded. Everybody will get a link to the recording following the webinar. We will also have the opportunity to use the chat feature. You can feel free to make comments and have discussions on the side if you'd like in the chat box, and feel free to give us any of your opinions and your thoughts on what we're discussing. Great. So let's get started for the first topic or discussion to begin with. I just want to get a little bit of background about our panelists. I'd like to give each of you guys a moment to introduce yourselves, a brief summary of what your day-to-day role looks like, and whether you have previous experience working from home prior to the isolation recommendations given by most countries. Amy, would you like to begin on this one?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Amy Oplinger Singh, and I am, as was introduced, a two-time Salesforce MVP, 7-time certified, senior consultant for the Cravali Group. And I've been working from home always. This is not a new situation for me, so I've been working from home since 2015. And my day-to-day is consulting on various projects, Salesforcing all day long.
Sorry, my mute. Great. Okay, Peter, what about you?
Hi, I'm Peter Coffey. I've been with Salesforce for 13 years. Prior to that, I was in technology media, back when that was something that was mostly print, for about 18 years. And I've been working full-time from home since 1988. The ability to do that well has grown enormously during that time. The things that I spend most of my time doing over the last 10 years have not been from home or from the office. They've been from, airplanes, hotels, and meeting rooms with customers. So for me, it's not so much that I'm not going to the office, because I hardly ever did that, but that the customer engagement now is so much more remote. So I hope to be able to contribute some perspectives on that as well.
Great. And Efrat?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you. My name is Efrat Geisler. I'm the Director of Product Management for Foresight. It's Panaya's Salesforce solution. Our product helps you foresee the impact and potential risk of any change you're making to your Salesforce org before going live in production. And actually, in my previous roles, I was leading the Salesforce activity and Salesforce teams at different startups, such as AppsFlyer and GetTaxi. I have had a few years of experience working remotely, or in fact, everywhere around the world that has internet connections, so just like you, Peter, from airports, hotels, and so on. So I'm quite familiar with it. I feel comfortable working remotely, and it's nice to meet you all, and I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Great, thanks everyone. Okay, so now that we've gotten a quick overview of each of you, let's dive in. For those of us who are used to working in an office each day, adjusting to working remotely can be a bit of a challenge, especially when it comes to collaborating with our coworkers and staying on task amidst the many home distractions. What tips and suggestions do you guys have for making yourself more efficient when working from home? Peter, would you like to start?
Sure. I've seen so many articles in the last 3-4 weeks for people who are new to this thing of working from home. And I think it's kind of like when you get in the water and you're halfway in and it feels like it's gonna be really cold, and then you just say the heck with it and dive in. You realize 2 minutes later, oh, this wasn't so bad at all. Trying to get started with it when you don't think of it as typical, you're gonna do things. There are articles that say, make sure you preserve boundaries between your work time and your home time. Make sure you put on the clothes in the morning like you're going to work, and at the end of the day, shut off the laptop. And all I can tell you is that's not what's worked for me. And it's important not to let anyone else tell you what's going to work for you. Try some things, find out what helps you focus. Sometimes at Salesforce, we say that if you're talking about work-life balance, that's a problem, because it implies that there are two different things that are opposed to each other that you need to balance. I just call it work-life integration. I have done conference calls while pushing my kids on the swings when they were young. I pretty much don't care what time of day it is. If it's India, it's going to be 11.5 or 12.5 hours off of me, whatever. My family knows that when I'm there and having conversations with them, I am. And if I have to step out of the room and do a phone call for 20 minutes, or if I have to, tuck in the kids and then work on a memo from 11 to midnight, whatever, it just becomes the water you swim in. And so by all means, read all the articles you see about, what might work for you. You might see something and say, hey, that might work for me, but find the thing that works for you. And of course, find the thing that works for your boss. One of the things that worked really well for me for the first 18 years I was doing this is I was in print media. And so there's no question about whether you were being productive. Were you generating publishable work? Were you, turning questions around in time? There was no question about that. But one of the things we do at Salesforce, as many of you know, is have this thing called V2MOM, Visions, Values, Methods, Obstacles, Measures. If you and your boss don't have a clear understanding of how your output is being measured and how your contribution is being measured, that's a problem whether you're working from home or working from the other side of your boss's desk. And so if what this does is get more organizations saying, maybe we need to have a more explicit process of agreeing, why are you here? It's not to rack up hours of sitting at your desk. That's a terrible measure of your contribution. And if all that this exercise does is get more organizations saying, let's just talk about how we're going to assess your contribution. How do you feel you should be assessed? At Salesforce, that's not a private negotiation with your boss. That's a document that the act of submitting it to your boss is done by clicking a button that says publish, and it immediately becomes available to anyone in the company. We think that's a great conversation to be having. At least a third of Salesforce people have been working remotely in the normal situation. We're famous at this point for the real estate, Salesforce Tower, San Francisco, London, New York, and so on. But the first time I ever heard the phrase windshield time was from a Salesforce account executive talking about the 30 minutes he'd have at the end of the day, because he was in the Texas, Oklahoma area where visiting a customer is a long drive almost all the time. I think that's just one of the things that we've always accepted, is that you'll do your work from where you are, and the more time you're spending with customers, the better. Right now, that's the biggest change for me, is that now I have to arrange customer engagements by this means. And oddly enough, that again is a case where once you actually dive into the water, it's not so bad. I've done conference keynotes by telepresence in India and in UK from Los Angeles when the travel just didn't work. The technology gets better all the time. I think one of the problems we have right now is that people tried it 10 years ago or tried it 19 years ago, right after 9/11, and they think they've, quote, learned, unquote, that this doesn't work very well. And I'm sorry, in just the last 2 years, the quality of the technology and the experience and people's comfort with it have all grown by so much that you almost need to forget whatever you've learned about work from home that's more than 3 years old, because the facilities and the performance and people's just general comfort level with it have grown so much.
Yeah, very interesting. Amy, what about you?
Yeah, I would agree with most of what Peter said, with kind of something that hit me on social media this morning. I saw a tweet about there's a lot of people working from home for the first time, mixed in with those of us who have had experience working from home at the same time. This is different. I've worked from home for years, but what we're experiencing now is not your typical work from home scenario. People have a lot of stress going on. There is a literal fire outside right now in our world, and this is stressing a lot of people out. So for me, yes, I've always worked from home. Yes, I've managed to, I have a separate office, and I won't work at 11 o'clock at night. I'm one of those that shuts my laptop off. I've learned that, a long time ago. I have that boundary, and that's what works for me. Like what Peter said, what works for him. This works for me. And I have my kids. But now when I shut my laptop off at 5 o'clock, I go out and I have to be the school teacher. And I'm running what I call daily stand-ups with my children. What did you work on yesterday? What are you working on today? Is there anything keeping you from getting it done by Friday? Well, how can I help you? Do you have any blockers? You know what I mean? So this is where Peter said that work-life thing is going back and forth. I'm using skills that I use in my daily life to now deal with my home life. So I guess what I'm getting from all this is that for those of you that are new to working from home, it's not always like this. I used to be able to go and take my laptop and work at a nice lunch, looking at a lake if I wanted to. I don't have that luxury now. It's very different now. So don't feel bad if you're struggling with working from home. Don't feel like, oh God, this is not for me. And I hope that companies don't take a look at their productivity right now and judge whether or not they allow people to continue to work from home based on working from home situation in a pandemic. It's two totally different situations.
Amy, if I can just come back in to reinforce one thing, whatever I said about flexibility, your to-do list and your calendar are more important now than ever, especially to your point, when you want to make sure that you've eliminated the things that can screw up your family, because that was always top priority for me, and it worked. But yeah, the to-do list and the calendar, however you choose to use them, do be using them. Yeah.
Cool. Efrat, what about you?
Yeah, so I agree with what was said here. I think the trick is really to listen to yourself, to experiment, to find out what works best for you. There's not one single way to work from home. I do think that the two key success factors here is, first of all, to create that focused and comfortable workspace for you, whatever it may be. I know some people are sitting outside on their porches. Some people like the open space and music in the background. Some people prefer a quiet room. So I think you just need to build the routine and find your rhythm and do what works best for you. And the other key thing here, I think, is the collaboration with the teams. So I think for me, it's about being available and proactively communicating with the teams that I work with and continuing the daily or weekly meetings and stand-ups that we have. For me, for example, in the role of product now, I'm constantly working closely with the R&D teams. We have the daily syncs with the director of R&D and his teams. And I think it's important to keep that going. And in terms of the collaboration, to make sure everyone has the tools that they need to work and to succeed. and do their job successfully. But definitely find the way that works best for you and experiment with it.
For sure. Cool. So we know that there are many small things that you can do to improve efficiency in your day-to-day. But what many of us might be missing out on are the great tools, the great features out there that help improve collaboration and business processes, kind of like what Efrat was just talking about. What tools or Salesforce features do any of you guys recommend to help your teams work efficiently together, keep things running smoothly, making sure that the relationships that you have within your office, within your coworkers, are continuing to run smoothly, because it can be a stressful time right now, and we want to make sure that we're operating in our teams as best as possible and avoiding any unnecessary friction. Amy, do you have any suggestions?
Sure. So for my projects that I've been on, Microsoft Teams, Slack, Google, those are all big collaborative tools that we've been using. Of course, keeping the stories on Jira and keeping everybody on the same page, daily stand-ups and what they're working on. This is just a norm for those of us that have worked from home because we don't have that in-office time. I think that when you work in an office, you get a lot out of those random meetings when you stop by someone's desk and you're just chit-chatting, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait, I'm working on that too, and I tried this before, and this worked. So that part is probably a little frustrating for people that are new to working from home to get used to. So I would encourage people to really dive into Chatter at this time. Chatter is sort of one of those unsung heroes in Salesforce. It's either companies use it all the time or have no idea what it is. So Chatter, Slack, any of the tools that you can find that works for your team, that everybody has access to, that everybody can agree on is one kind of form of communication. This is it. Not I use Slack and you use Hangouts and this kind of disparate system. So that's what's worked in my world.
Cool. Peter, what about you?
Anecdotally, my understanding is that we have seen a huge spike in usage of and adoption of Chatter, which is a 10-year-old product at this point, which many companies had not discovered. I've said that many companies merely showed it to people. And if you just look at Chatter and use it as an email replacement, then it's like buying an electric toothbrush and never finding the on switch. Chatter is a power tool concealed as an ordinary chat facility. And if you use it well, when we first turned it on in 2010, I'd been with the company for 3 years, and suddenly I felt like I was in the office. And I'd been working from home the whole time, but suddenly the ability to be a member of Chatter groups and have a digest every morning waiting in my inbox of those groups. I spent probably 20 minutes every morning going through order of 60 or 70 Chatter digests. I skim them quickly. And the ability to just have a sense of, okay, this is what's going on in the Sydney office. This is what's going on in the Service Cloud product line. This is what's going on in terms of planning the world tours. It's not hierarchical. It is exactly like what Amy was talking about, the stuff that you hear when you're wandering around the office and you overhear something and realize you have something to contribute. So I'm really happy that so many of our customers are discovering this thing they've been paying to have all along and haven't really understood what it could do for them. That's been tremendously important. But Amy also made another point, by implication at least, when she talked about the fact that there's also going to be other things in the room. I don't feel that as a WFH I've ever had the luxury of saying, well, this is how I do it. My job is to interface with other people however they prefer to do that. I have to use 5 or 6 different web conferencing platforms. I have to be able to move back and forth between them and not get irritated about which ones make certain things easy or difficult. Flexibility and being as much of a chameleon as you can and taking on the colors of whatever situation you're in. I think it's one of the things that makes WFH successful instead of feeling like you're constantly having to run uphill.
Yeah. Efrat?
Yeah, I agree. The tools that were mentioned, I think Zoom, we also use Asana as well. We have some teams using Jira. In the past, I've used Slack. At Panaya, we actually use our own tool, that's Foresight. So I myself use Foresight to manage the features that I'm building. We have a workspace where people can create and manage and collaborate on all of the tasks and the technical specifications. So we're kind of constantly QAing and improving our product. I think that there are so many different tools to use, like you both said. I think the key is to pick the right one for you and to make sure the teams are not using too many, because then each team is using a different tool and then they're not collaborating with each other. And I think that's it's important to pick the right tool and make sure that everyone is using it properly and it works for them.
Great. I want to dive in really quickly because I think that what Amy and Peter were talking about with Chatter is very interesting. Like you guys mentioned, it's a feature that not many, or not many, but not everybody,
enough.
not enough, not everyone has been using, and that a lot of people just don't realize how powerful it can be. Do you guys have, anecdotes of how you've used Chatter in the past that brings it beyond just a communication channel like Slack or something? How does it help you guys?
I think the most underappreciated thing that becomes completely natural to do in Chatter once you've done it once is to realize, oh, wait a minute, someone just asked that question. We talked about that 3 years ago, and you quickly search for a couple of words you remember people using, you find that thread, you copy and paste a URL, or you @ someone in a comment at the bottom of that thread, and bang, a whole chunk of corporate memory has just been served up. And now that you can actually edit posts, there are things that I maintain on Chatter that I call the catalogs, which are posts containing links to other posts. And every now and then I'll add a new one, and it becomes corporate memory in almost the most literal way you can imagine. And I think people just don't realize, oh my gosh, that becomes so straightforward. When you have an organization that's growing at our speed, at any given time, half the people who are talking to our customers have been with us for less than 2 years. And so that ability to immerse them in stuff that we've spent 20 years learning, or that we thoroughly discussed only 3 years ago, it's maybe the single biggest multiplier of what I'm able to contribute is just being able to say, oh yeah, Chatter thread, Bing, here, go look at this, and pull in this new reference from this article or whatever. Really treating it as the tapestry of what you as an organization know and are good at doing.
Very interesting. Great. Okay, I have another question for you guys. In speaking to some Salesforce managers prior to this webinar, some of them actually mentioned to me that their organizations already had what they called pandemic preparedness protocols, which I was very interested to hear. And so they said that for some of them, the switch to remote work was relatively smooth. Do any of you guys, have you experienced at your current position or previous position any kind of protocols? If so, how does an organization create something like that, or any other protocol that allows for a seamless transition to remote work? Peter, you want to begin?
I remember what happened back in 9/11 when all of a sudden people discovered, oh my gosh, the product keys and the license keys for these key pieces of software were in this desk drawer, which is now under the rubble of the World Trade Center. Wow. And they discovered how brittle their capability was for dealing with disruption. And so scenario planning, saying, what would happen if this office were simply not there anymore, or whatever, or if this key person were down. I'm not a huge fan of the idea that everybody's got to be cross-trained on everybody else's job. Tom Brady once said that the reason he had 5 Super Bowl rings is that everyone on the line knew exactly what their job was and wasn't wasting any time or brain worrying about other people doing their job. So there is something to be said for that. But making sure that everything's got a backup, that has been tested, because there are so many horror stories about companies that thought they had a backup in place, and then someone updated a software driver and the system's been lovingly archiving garbage for the last 2 years. It's just tremendously important to make the time to test your plans, to have people be comfortable with them, so that the real thing is not the first time that they've done this. This is experience that dates back to the Mercury and Gemini missions, let alone Apollo. Is you have to have gone through the process enough times that it's familiar to you, and the stress of the fact that this is real is not compounded by the stress of, oh, wait a minute, I don't actually know how to do that. So yeah, and Amy, you made Amy and Afat, you both made some comments about this time it is different. The stress is higher, right? Though that's not controllable, but the stress of, oh wait a minute, I never actually had to execute that step. How do you do that? That's not the time to be finding that out. So yeah, um, plan, test, discover what your plan didn't include, fix it, and do that. That's preparedness in general, with pandemic preparedness is one small subset of that.
Yeah. Okay. Amy?
And
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Are you going to go, Effet?
Oh, I just wanted to say I agree. Thanks with what you said, Peter. And I think just to add to that, maybe first of all, knowledge sharing and documentation, and that could also help with being prepared. Having the teams know what they're working on, how to access the data, how to manage the system properly, sharing that knowledge on an ongoing basis. Like you said, not wasting time and having everybody be an expert at everything, but enough to know and to be able to pick up from someone else. I mean, if they're out of the office or something like that, anybody can, you know, jump in and then continue that if needed at a stressful time. And also just proper documentation on the important things and protocols that are needed.
Amy, we'll go to you.
Yes, I think that what Peter mentioned, 9/11, I think that was kind of a catalyst for a lot of large enterprise organizations realizing we need a plan. Again, this situation seems to be a little different with the stay-at-home order. I don't recall that being a thing for 9/11. So
we weren't getting on airplanes either.
Right. Well, no airplanes, but yeah, the stay-at-home order, I think, has added another layer of complexity, again, that is really testing companies to be prepared thoroughly for these things, and to kind of, the project that I'm on now, the large enterprise financial institution, and they kind of had a rollout, like a waved, staggered kind of work from home move before their state was, you know, put on the stay-at-home order. So their complexity around the security and the VPN issues and all of that they really got a chance to kind of work out and work out the kinks prior to the entire office being closed and all of the employees across the globe having to stay home and stressing their VPN security networks and things like that. So it's very, very different, I think, this time. But yeah, it's an important piece of information that going forward, no company, I don't think, will not have a preparedness plan going forward from this.
One thing that I would like to call attention to is that some companies treat this almost as the security department's job, and they treat their pandemic preparedness plan almost as if it's a secret until it has to, you know, so you rip open the envelope and discover what the secret orders are. I said the other day on Twitter, pandemic preparedness is like digital transformation. If you do it for yourself, but you don't help your customers, partners, and supply chain do it, all you get is a very limited and gloomy satisfaction of, well, at least we were ready. We can't get anything done, but at least we can tell ourselves that we were ready. You have to make investments beyond your own borders. You have to overshare and over communicate and bring everybody else into the party, or else your preparedness becomes almost irrelevant. You're a perfectly curated drop of oil in a world of water. And so investing in your ecosystem, if you've never thought of it that way before, think of it in terms of your preparedness. If nothing else, you're building an ecosystem of resilience and readiness, and not just, you know, your little perfectly faceted jewel of it.
That's an interesting point. Great. Okay, I'm going to dive into Lightning very quickly. We are all aware that Lightning has some great features for remote usage in general. Do you think that organizations who have already made the switch to Lightning have a strong advantage during a time like this? And if so, what Lightning features and tools do you think help in situations such as this? Amy, would you like to begin?
Sure. I would say it depends. Of course, if they have Einstein implemented, they have all of that advantage over classic users. But I think whether you're on Lightning or classic, in times like this, I really just am encouraging everybody to look back to the good old chatter standby. when in my previous life, before I was a Salesforce consultant, I was a user, and I loved Chatter, and that was how I kept my sales going and myself informed, and I was an early adopter of the Chatter. So that, I think, is, whether you're in Classic or Lightning, is a huge advantage for companies right now, to keep everybody on the same page, to keep those account insights up to date and not be so dependent on emails back and forth.
Okay, Peter?
If you look at the things that Lightning brings you, sometimes they seem very small. Oh, I can have more columns in a dashboard. Well, this is one situation. This is to allude to things that both Efrat and Amy have said. Things that used to be your unconsidered data sources of things you overhear and so on are not there anymore. I will never have a big enough screen to show all the things that I wish were at least in my peripheral vision at any one moment. So all the things that Lightning has done to increase the amount of information that can be readily available to me, not tables of numbers, but good visual analytics that make things jump out at me, that alone is a pretty darn good reason for having done that. Making sure that the experience is going to be as familiar and seamless and natural as possible on all the different devices we use, because at any given moment over the course of the day, I will be on my phone, I will be on an iPad, I will be on a MacBook, I will be on a big desktop machine. Being able to swim in that sea of information and not constantly have to be wrestling with discrepancies from different presentations, that's worth a significant amount. And one of the things going forward from this is that we're really understanding citizen developer matters. Being able to have people who are not of the IT organization or don't call themselves developers still able to conjure up a piece of intellectual property in the form of a Lightning component that can be readily made available to people in other time zones, in other physical locations. That's one of the force multiplication effects that we really need to function in the current high stress environment. And it will make us work better in a more distributed and collaborative way going forward. What I'm asking people right now is, what do you wish you'd known 6 weeks ago? What do you know you have to get done in the next 6 weeks? What are you going to have a chance to do over the next 6 months? And how is this going to be changing our lives for the next 6 years? And among the things is already not too soon to start saying is, hey, what are we learning here about one-way doors we're going to go through? And once we've made this investment in this capability, our customers are going to say, shoot, we don't want to go get along without that. All of a sudden, sidewalk, curbside pickup of your groceries is going to become a thing, and everyone's going to need that. And what that means is that digital transformation initiatives that you might have thought you could do at your leisure over the next couple of years, you're going to have to do them quickly. And once you've done them, people are going to want you to keep them. And Lightning is so much about that productivity and consistency of experience and ability to give people all the information they need that I think Lightning's important. I also think that it can be adopted pretty quickly. You asked the question in a way of, do people who already have it have a big advantage? No, people who already have it have a small advantage, but people who adopt it quickly will get that advantage too. And once they have it, it is big. Having Lightning is great. Having gotten started on it early is helpful, but don't think, oh, we can't adopt Lightning now, we're too busy. That's not a good way to think about it. If you were thinking about it, for heaven's sake, treat this as a license to tell people, yeah, we got to do this.
Okay, this brings us to the end. Do you guys have any final tips, recommendations, ideas, anything that you want to share that we haven't touched on yet? I'll start with Peter.
No. I've talked enough. I've talked enough.
It's good. We like it. Great stories. Efrat, you got anything?
Yeah, I think everything, just to sum it all up, just to continue communicating with the teams, to be available, be quick to resolve issues. I like what you said, Peter, about the customers, about things that are nice to have are now becoming must-haves. So for me on the product side right now, and my team, we're being very especially sensitive to what's going on in the field and what our customers need. And we're focusing our development and our R&D efforts on quick wins for the customers to help them do their jobs better in light of the situation that's happening right now, because they're working remotely and they have those challenges. So I think it's very important to understand that and to focus on the digital transformation that we're going through, and to make sure we're kind of up to speed and continuing to offer value to our customers. And I think just to stay positive and to have fun and try to make the most of the situation. And like we said, learn from it and become better from it.
Amy?
I would say to everybody, take a deep breath. We'll get through this together. Don't judge working from home based on your frustrations of things going on now. It is a wonderful thing to have, and those of us that have been doing it prior to the pandemic love it. Wouldn't change it for the world, and we're here to help you. If you have any questions or concerns, you can reach out, I'm sure, to any one of us, and stay safe and healthy, everybody.
Great. Okay, I have one question before we leave. I'll read it off and then we'll wrap up. The question is from Robert, and it says, when we implement Salesforce, Accenture taught us the term of relevant and contextual. Changing people's paradigm from email to chatter is much easier when you explain the benefits of chatter over email. Email won't go away, but you need to understand the benefits. Does anybody have a response to that?
Number one benefit of chatter is discoverability. I don't have to know whose name needs to be on the distribution list. People can find stuff, and people can draw other people into a conversation in a very straightforward way. And if you use chatter as if it's an email replacement, that's all it will be for you. But if you treat it as that kind of a medium for discoverability of who knows stuff, who's doing stuff, who has already figured out stuff, from past experience, treat it as a medium of playbooks and discoverable expertise and memory, you will realize just how much power you've been failing to take advantage of by just treating it as, unfortunately, we named it a tool for chatter.
Great. Anyone else has a comment to that?
I do. I relied on it heavily in sales because there were lots of moving parts that I needed information on from other departments. And if they simply chattered it on the account, I knew about it without having to track down Jesse and track down this person and track down this person and waste half of my day when I could be selling. Okay, so this for me is my main selling point of chatter is, you're a sales rep, you want to get things done, you don't have time to waste, here's all your information right here, so use it. It's only as good as the organization that you're using it. You can't just set it up for email updates constantly, because then people are going to tune that noise out. So actively use it.
I'm so glad you talked about being able to put stuff on the account object instead of having to figure out who's the person who knows it. That's the lightsaber moment when you say, oh my gosh, the account itself can be a participant in conversations. Fantastic.
Great. Amazing. Well, thank you, panelists, for sharing your insights and your tips with us. We loved hearing the different points of views from each of you guys. Efrat, our Director of Product Management from Panaya, briefly mentioned during one of the questions some of the benefits of using our Salesforce solution, Foresight, for improving efficiency and collaboration when managing changes to your Salesforce org. We will be sending out an email with some more information about it if you guys are interested. And feel free to reach out to us with any questions about how we can help you guys out. We hope that this webinar was helpful and interesting for everyone. Thanks for joining, and we hope you all have a great rest of your day, and good luck with handling the current crisis. Everybody stay strong.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.